In this video, I wanted to give an overview of the Mnemonica stack by Juan Tamariz. And this is kind of an update or remake to a previous video I had on the Mnemonica tutorial. And I wanted to cover a couple of different topics with Mnemonica stack as far as what is Mnemonica stack, why would I want to learn it, what are some tricks, what are some advantages of it, how do I use it, what are some alternative stacks, and maybe a couple other questions to get into, and just my thoughts in general on Mnemonica stack and what I've learned using it. Alright, so let's jump in. First of all, what is Mnemonica stack? Well, Mnemonica stack is an order that you put the deck, your card deck, into that was devised by a famous Spanish magician named Juan Tamariz. And this is not the only stack. You can find stacks go back like Cy Stebbins' stack. And you'll find some even more modern day stack. Aronson stack is kind of the Mnemonica stack competitor. People will usually, you'll hear that all the time. You'll either learn Mnemonica stack or Aronson stack, and people will argue about which one is better. Well, each one has its own kind of pluses and minuses, right? Disadvantages and benefits. So we'll kind of get into that. And you know, and what I mean by the order that you set the cards, you know, like if the first card, this is not Mnemonica stack, but you know, if the first card is the Queen of Hearts, this one, the second card is the Ten of Clubs, third card is the Nine of Hearts. So it's the order in which the cards are set. That will be your card stack. And you find Mnemonica stack used in what's called memorized deck work. And memorized deck work has to do with actually memorizing an entire deck of cards and where every single card is at each number place in the deck. So you know, like the first card is going to be the Three of Hearts and the second card is going to be this card, etc., etc. And then you can actually recall those numbers and those positions immediately to mind in the middle of a trick when you need to. And there's going to be some tricks that involve doing that and will help to make some pretty spectacular miracles, if you want to call them, that you couldn't do with an ordinary deck. And the thing about memorized deck work, like with Mnemonica, is kind of the cool thing is most audience members, laymen, are not aware of the concept of a memorized deck. So it will kind of be something they won't be able to figure out, because it's not like, oh, he's got a trick deck of cards. You know, it's not like you have tricky cards. It's a normal deck of cards, but it's actually, I say it is a gimmick deck of cards because it really is a gimmick. You have to carry it around, but it's a gimmick that you can make using your own cards. You just set them and stack them in order, and there you go. You're ready to go. All right, so those are kind of some of the advantages of Mnemonica stack. You can do some really awesome tricks with it that you couldn't do with a regular stack. But it does have some drawbacks and disadvantages as well. One of the main ones is you can't shuffle the cards. I mean, you can learn to do false shuffles, and you're probably going to have to, unless you want to kind of try to fly under the radar without doing any false shuffles with Mnemonica stack. And I can make I'll try to make maybe a tutorial on how to do false shuffles with Mnemonica stack, but you'll have to learn special shuffles, that basically full deck shuffles usually, that do not alter the position of the cards at all, which are usually the hardest shuffles to learn, by the way. And there are some great cardmen who have made a living using Mnemonica stack or other stacks, like Darwin Ortiz and Boris Wilde, for example, and Juan Tamariz, there's an example. So it's possible, but like those guys have some amazing advanced card skills. They can sit there and do full deck false shuffles, and Pharaoh shuffles, whatever, and it'll look like they're doing real shuffles, but they're completely false. But they're really good at what they do, and that can take years and years of work. There's the one, what's it called? There's the one full deck false shuffle. I can't think of this. Really slipping my mind. I could think zero shuffle. That's it. The zero shuffle is a good one when you're doing table work with Mnemonica stack. Right. So one of the drawbacks as well is all your cards have to be in a specific order. Right. You can't just pick up any deck or your friend's deck. They can't just hand you a deck and say do a trick, and you do a Mnemonica stack trick. So you got to have that deck on you, and it's got to be in the right order at all times. And if one card's out of order, maybe you'll successfully do the trick, and it'll still be okay. But a lot of times, even if one card is out of order, that can mess up the entire trick. So that can kind of even mess with your mind a little bit if you're kind of thinking about that. You're like, what if I mess up the trick a little bit, or what if the stack is a little bit out of order? You also can't really handle the cards as freely. I know me personally, I like to do a lot of fancy cardistry things and flourishes, and you really can't do that with Mnemonica stack because you're trying to keep the deck in exact order, and so all that's going to mess up the order of the cards. And also, if you were to like drop the cards, well, that's going to bust your stack right there. Also, the spectator obviously can't shuffle the cards, even if they ask. And you probably don't even want them to handle the cards. You kind of could. You'd have to have a lot of audience management, and make sure they just do those little single cuts, which don't really change the order of the cards. So you got to have a little bit of audience management as well. And then it can be, if you do get your deck out of order, or you do need to set up, it can be a little bit of a pain just to have to set the deck up into the right order. It takes a little bit of time. It's not the biggest deal in the world, but if you're limited for time, it's something to consider. All right, so what are some of the what are some of the tricks using Mnemonica stack? Well, Tamariz has a whole book. His book on Mnemonica stack is full of tricks you can do with it. Really, one of the best tricks you can do, and he even says this. He says, if you're going to learn anything, just learn this and stop. You don't need to get any more tricks, and but I'll include some more in case you want to keep going with it. And that's where you basically every card is a key card. So you're going to basically the spectator can take any card. He can cut the deck, take a card, put it in his pocket. You can just, by looking at the next card, which will be the bottom card, you can immediately tell what card he has in his possession without ever seeing that card. So that can look kind of amazing, and there's some mentalism tricks that use that. I'm trying to think of the guy's name. Richard Osterlin. He doesn't use Mnemonica stack, but he uses his own stack. He uses some tricks that are use that same concept. Another popular trick you could do is card at any number, ACAN. I've got a tutorial on a Mnemonica stack ACAN trick, and I'll try to put up another one on a double ACAN that I invented, which is pretty cool. I've got a good reaction from that. Tamariz also has a poker dealing trick where the spectator basically asks for, with some limitations, asks for a certain poker hand, and you deal that poker hand out, and it's the exact poker hand that they asked for. But obviously it can't be like any poker hand, so there's some limitations to it. He also has a trick which I like the idea of it. It takes a lot of memorization, but essentially you deal to he counts down, or he'll count the word black, like B-L-A-K, and it'll get to a black card, then it'll count like T-E-N or something. It'll get to a 10. He'll keep doing that throughout the entire deck, and then eventually it gets to the spectator's chosen card. But you can only do that because you know it's a trick that's built into the Mnemonica stack deck, so it only works with Mnemonica stack, just like the poker trick from Tamariz. Now, if you're considering learning Aronson stack instead, just know that Aronson stack also has a ton of tricks associated with it, and pretty much probably similar tricks as well. He has like a poker trick, I believe, and you could do similar a card at any number tricks, because some of those just are dependent on you memorizing the deck. So you could really do it with any memorized deck and not just Mnemonica stack. But just know that you can pretty much do the same tricks with each stack, but the tricks that are dependent on the stack, like the poker dealing tricks, are going to be different depending on which stack you learn. So you'll have to learn it for the particular stack. So you'd have to look at Tamariz's book to figure out like the poker dealing trick for Mnemonica stack. You couldn't look at Aronson's book, Bound to Please or whatever it is, and use that poker trick, because it's not going to work, right? Okay, so how do you learn Mnemonica stack? So essentially, the thing about Mnemonica stack, as I mentioned before, is it's a memorized deck, so you have to memorize the entire deck. So it's not just about putting the cards in a certain order, which some of the tricks you could and then just do the trick. But a lot of the tricks also involve knowing the location of every card in the deck. Now that seems very daunting, but there are some tricks and you can learn it eventually. It took me, I think, a couple months to get it down. You could probably learn it faster though, with some of the tricks. But what I did is I had an app initially on my phone. I don't know if you can still find them. It was a Google phone, and I just found it in the App Store. And it would basically, I started going cards just 1 through 13 to 4th of the deck, and it would just flash either the number. It was like a flash card, and you would just think of the card associated with that number, or you could get it to show the card, and then you could try to think of the number, see if you got it right. So I would just go through that whenever I had a free moment. And then when I memorized 1 through 13 fairly well, that I added 13 through 26, and I was doing 1 through 26, and so I just did that in chunks of 13, then 1 through 39, and then 1 through 52, until I had them all down fairly well. Now with Mnemonica stack, in the tricks, you want to know these pretty cold, like you don't want to be thinking about them. Because in the middle of a trick, you're going to have to recall them instantly, and you don't want to have to sit there and think, oh, what's the 26 card? You need to know it cold. You need to hear the number 26 and think of the card instantly. Okay, that's associated with that number. So you want to work enough on the memorization where you have it down fairly cold. There's a couple other ways you can memorize Mnemonica, and Tamariz has a way in his book where essentially you just take a magic marker and you take a deck of cards and you write, I believe, for the 4 clubs, the first card, you write the number 1 on it in magic marker, and then and he has this whole song that you learn, I think, and you keep singing the song, and it's associated I don't know if this is the song, but it's the 4 clubs is the number 1. I don't know. He associate, you learn it better if you do it through music, and also if you see it visually, so that you're and you hear it auditorily. Is that even the word? You're hearing it through your ears, so that you're hitting upon every aspect of learning, because some people learn better in different ways. He claims some people have learned it very fast that way, in an afternoon or something. I'll believe it when I see it. That sounds fairly crazy. But there are some new products, and I'll try to leave links to those as well, or if you're in my blog post, you can see links to those. Mnemonica trainers are out. There's a complete book that Vanishing Ink Carries, where they go through and they teach you a system where you can learn half a deck in I think like 15 minutes or so, or 30 minutes or an hour, I don't know, and then you're supposed to be able to learn the whole thing in like under an hour or 2 hours, something along those lines. But basically it uses visual concepts, and I talk about this in my blog posts in detail, so I won't go over this because this will take a long time. But essentially the way I started with the app, but then I actually really honed in my skills on Mnemonica by using a visual PEG memory system, which I learned from a Harry Lorraine book, Superpower Memory. He's a good old famous magician, and he did a lot of memory work as well. And he had a way of I actually learned it in order to memorize a deck of cards, because he has a way you can memorize a deck of cards as a magic trick. But I wanted to apply that to Mnemonica as well, so I did that. That took quite a bit of work though, but that's a way you can not only memorize any deck, but also memorize Mnemonica as well. And I've also got a post on how to memorize a deck of cards, so check that out as well on my site, so that'll help you get a little bit of understanding into all of that. And as far as also some other resources or tricks, there's also been some independent releases as far as like tricks involving Mnemonica Stack that I've seen here and there. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but there are some, like Vanishing Ink Carries, and there are some links to those in my blog post. And also, as far as other stacks, there are, I'd like to mention that Woody Aragorn has, he used Mnemonica Stack because he's a Spanish magician, so they all like worship Tamariz and learn everything about Tamariz like when they grow up. So he was like everything about Tamariz, and he did Mnemonica Stack, but he actually came up with his own stack later on that he uses now and claims like it's better and it has like better properties and tricks. And Danny D'Artis, he has like his own, he has a personal stack, but it's really just based, he's another Spanish magician, card magician, but it's really just based on Cy Stebbins' stack, and he like puts a couple of cards out of order, so it's not as easy to notice that there's a pattern if someone were to look at the cards. And one thing I failed to mention that I like to mention is that one of the advantages also of Mnemonica Stack, and one of the properties that Tamariz built into the stack, was the fact that you can get into it from new deck order. And this is like really hard to do in advanced, I'll be honest with you, but there is a way you can do. It's like there's some runs. I have a video for it on the blog. You can see if somebody teaching how to do it, but you do like runs, and then you do like, I don't know, 5 perfect Pharaoh shuffles and some more runs, yada yada yada. But there's a whole like system of shuffling the cards where someone could hand you a new deck, you can open them, shuffle the cards that way, and then you'll be like into Mnemonica Stack, and then you could be like doing your Mnemonica tricks and blowing minds if that's your thing to do. But yeah, I hope I covered as much as I wanted to cover in this video, trying to make it not too long. But if you have any questions, let me know. I hope this was useful. If it was, please leave me a thumbs up, and consider subscribing, and check out my next video, guys. Thanks for watching. Appreciate it.